The Wife of God. Part 2. This will be a continuation from my first video about the wife of God. I'm making this video because there are some key points I wanted to highlight and emphasize on. Wisdom is introduced in the Old Testament of the Bible. Most frequently mentioned in Psalms, Proverbs, and Song of Solomon. Jesus' birth is first mentioned in Luke chapter 7 verse 2, which is in the New Testament. If Solomon possessed wisdom, that would mean she existed before Jesus. I want to make this clear, Jesus was talked about in the Old Testament as someone coming in the near future. His existence had not yet come in the physical world, but people spoke of him often because God had placed that truth on their hearts to reveal to others. The thought and idea of Jesus existed before his physical body did, but his physical manifestation wasn't made known until the New Testament. Many people confuse wisdom as Jesus' bride, but this will help you understand who she truly is. Wisdom existed in the Old Testament. There are so many books mentioning wisdom, and how valuable she is to man. There is a reason why she is highly thought of. When King Solomon asked God for wisdom, he gave it to him freely. If wisdom had not existed, she wouldn't have been able for him to obtain so freely. What I'm trying to say is when Solomon asked, God delivered. Simply because her existence was already established. As I mentioned in my last video, wisdom wants us to seek her, not worship her. King Solomon specifically asked God for wisdom. If you remember the definition of seeking, in this case seeking would mean asking. King Solomon asked God for some of this wisdom, just as Jesus did. Jesus knew wisdom because of her pre-existence. Jesus knew that there was always a feminine presence with God. When they asked Jesus for a sign, he specifically mentions what Queen Sheba was seeking. He also proclaimed that it was greater than Solomon. Jesus is saying the sign is wisdom. She is the greater. Jesus always knew he had a father and mother in heaven. Jesus also knew his father was married. Contrary to most belief, when Jesus says the Spirit and the bride says come, he's acknowledging his mother who is the Spirit. Wisdom is not called the Holy Spirit. That's why Jesus says the Spirit and bride, not the Holy Spirit and bride. Wisdom never calls herself the Holy Spirit. The church wasn't in existence at the beginning of this universe, therefore the word holy came into existence after wisdom. Even if God's Spirit isn't called wisdom, it probably wouldn't be called holy, it would simply be called God's Spirit. Labeling his Spirit holy is simply saying whatever isn't holy wouldn't know it, or feel it, or possess it. Putting holy in front of God's Spirit is simply saying whatever is deemed as unholy is occult or demonic. God's Spirit is in the planets, but since they're not considered holy, by default they're evil. Astrologists are called demonic for studying a planet that consists of God's Spirit and a universe that is surrounded with it. Whatever has a spirit that's not considered holy is the devil. God's Spirit is his wife. God's Spirit isn't limited to only holy folks. Wisdom is in everything, holy and unholy. People who say only holy people have the Holy Spirit also believe there will be no marriage in heaven. They believe God's wife is the church. God's Spirit, who is called wisdom, is in everything. Animals, people, and nature. Wisdom is so valuable because wisdom can be gained from any situation, no matter the circumstances. Wisdom is in life and death. Wisdom is in joy and sorrow. Wisdom is in right and left. Wisdom is neither right nor wrong because she is found in both. When you call God's Spirit the Holy Spirit, you're proclaiming, if you're not holy, you wouldn't have it. You can't label his spirit and call her holy when wisdom is yelling from the gates of the city for everyone to hear. Why is wisdom yelling? It's because you are seeking the wrong person. Wisdom existed before the church, wisdom also existed before this universe and galaxy. If wisdom is plainly telling you I existed before the creation of this universe, why are people believing the church is God's wife? If there is a feminine presence with him, why would it not be his wife? It's like you're saying God looked at wisdom and said, "You know what? I have you here, but I think I'll wait until humans create a building and organization and marry them instead." People assume God waited for us to create a church just for him to marry it. It's so much ignorance until it's insane. God became a husband first, that's why wisdom established her place before Jesus' birth. I also want to say, in order for Solomon to have received the wisdom he had and asked for, wisdom would have had to have been in existence at that moment. Many people spoke of Jesus' role and purpose before his existence. But how many were able to produce him? No one. Wisdom was being produced in the Old Testament. She was known also. That means she's very, very, very real, and extremely important.